Hi guys, and welcome to the second episode of my podiumentary. Today I'm in Moss Side, Manchester with Jan, a superwoman, a super mother who's been fighting the joint enterprise cases for a good 10 years now. And we discussed the fallacy of foresight and a few other things that the government should definitely be ashamed of. So stay tuned, click the links in the end to support and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We have Jan from JENGbA. JENGbA was created in 2010.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And since then you've done amazing work all over the country, haven't you?
Yeah,
So,
I think so.
Yeah,
I hope so. I hope so.
Oh, so, and you've won a lot of awards, right?
Yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, JENGbA was sort of formed in 2010 because we myself and Gloria Morrison, who's the co-founder with me, we both appeared on a panorama which springboarded joint enterprise out there to the public, and it was because of that someone approached us and said, "There's £10,000 to sort of start the campaign, if you like, or how could they help us?" So that's how the campaign began. Basically, two women at the kitchen tables trying to work out what was going wrong.
Tell me, what is JENGbA firstly?
JENGbA is short for Joint Enterprise Not Guilty by Association. Myself and Gloria, my son was convicted of a joint enterprise murder in 2007. Gloria's son's best friend was also convicted of a murder, I think in 2006. And both of us knew that neither of these two young people had murdered anyone. It was kind of guilt by association, their association with the actual perpetrator. And to us, that didn't make sense, that you can go to prison for murder, get a life sentence, even though the actual court itself knows that you didn't inflict the blow that killed someone. So that to us was outrageous, and we had to try and find out whether it was just us that had happened to, and the courts had got it wrong in our cases, or whether that was happening throughout the country. And much to our disappointment, we found out that it was happening all over the country.
So all over the country, a lot of people are being convicted for crimes they haven't committed under this thing called joint enterprise.
Yeah.
So in terms of law, if you can help me out, what is joint enterprise?
What joint enterprise means is if someone is sadly killed or murdered, rather than the police and the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, trying to find out who that person is that committed that murder, they will gather a whole bunch of people who could perhaps have been at the scene or have knowledge of what had happened, regardless of whether they had any intent or not. Their association can be friendships or family relations. So what we found was that there were a lot of young people, because we are human and we do socialise quite a lot. Most young people have got friends. So if one of their friends commits a crime, rather than focusing on that person who committed the crime and punishing them for what they've done, what happens is the whole group of friends are collected and they are found guilty collectively of that single crime, regardless of whether they had any input into it or not.
Would you say it's a lazy way, because what I'm hearing is horrifying, would you say it's a lazy way for the police and the government to kind of collect young people that they may have assumptions of?
It's more than lazy, because in many cases that we've come across, the actual perpetrator has walked free and doesn't face a day of prison, and people who haven't killed someone are serving life sentences for that crime. So it's more than lazy, it's actually an abomination, because to expect people who haven't killed to do a life sentence for that is just so wrong. No one should go to prison for a single day, let alone 30 years for another man's crime. For me, it began trying to sort of convince the public and everyone that my son was innocent, which was very difficult, because when people read something in the newspaper, they believe that what had happened in that case was true. So one of the things that I kept saying for many years was that my son was blind. He was at the scene when a man was kicked by one person and died, and that is tragic. But I know who that person was, so the police must know who that person was, because he confessed at the police station to his mother, who then told the police about the confession. So we should never have really gone to trial. But what happened was, when we got into the trial, I thought that the courts would prove that my son hadn't kicked the victim and therefore hadn't killed him, and that he would be found innocent. And this would have been a trial to sort of show the victim's family that this is how the rule of law works. We take people to court, we prove who's done it, they get found guilty, and those others are acquitted. But the whole process was about finding them all guilty. Presence at the scene would make you guilty, and the word that cropped up quite a few times in the trial was the phrase joint enterprise, which I'd never heard of before, and secondly, the possibility of foresight. So it was put to the jury that my son could possibly foresee the actions of the person that committed the crime, and therefore be guilty of that person's murder because he should have foreseen it, even if the person who committed the crime didn't know they were going to do it in the first place. So to me that sounded absurd, and when I spoke to people and said that that's what was happening, no one believed me because it just doesn't sound plausible. And when you consider as well that my son was blind at the time, he was 15 years old and blind, how could he foresee the actions of another when he couldn't see that person in the first place? So that's how absurd our case is. Yeah. And I just thought there'd been a dreadful mistake. But it's only when other people came to me and told me about their cases. Some people have said, well, my son wasn't even at the scene, so how can he be guilty? And to me, I can answer that by saying, well, my son was blind, so your son might as well have not, be blind as well, because you don't have to be at the scene. And the greatest victory for us was getting a case to the Supreme Court in 2016, and the Supreme Court acknowledging the law was wrong and had been for the last 32 years, and it was the foresight element.
Was that your case that managed to get?
It wasn't our case. Yeah. I think it's been very difficult for us to get our case back, because it's quite a high-profile case, and because I've been talking about it for a long time. Because what happens with the justice system is, if you prove them wrong and you keep talking about it, they punish you further. They don't say, oh, actually, you're right, and let's do something about it. They kind of dig their heels in and refuse to help you, because that would be confessing to the whole of the country we got this one wrong, didn't we? So the case that went was the Jogi case. And again, he was outside when a murder happened inside of a house, so he couldn't foresee what was going to happen inside of a house. And that foresight element was apparently what was wrong and had to be taken away. But cases that have happened since 2016, the foresight element is still used, but what they do now is they couple it with a gang narrative. So they continue to do what they did before. And unless you've got a really good lawyer and a good legal team, convictions are still happening.
Firstly, sorry to hear about the case. Just to add on to that, like you said, you thought it must have been a mistake until more people started coming around, gathering, saying the same thing happening. Mm-hmm. Followed by the Supreme Court punishing you if you actually manage to prove them wrong. Mm-hmm. How do you challenge that, and how has JENGbA challenged that?
Well, one of the things the Supreme Court did, we thought it was the most amazing victory ever. Mm-hmm. And legal professionals have told us that we made legal history. It's never been done before, and the chances of it happening again are pretty slim. So we thought all of the people that we support, my son included, would get the chance to go back to the Court of Appeal. But what the Supreme Court did is they put what you might call a clause in there to prevent that, which was called the substantial injustice test. Now, I would say any injustice is substantial, but they won't define what it is, and it's very difficult, and not only one person has managed to have their conviction quashed. So what we're sort of seeing now is that, oh yes, the law was wrong, but we only got it wrong with one person in the last 32 years. Of course they didn't, because JENGbA supports at least 1,500 people. They can't all be lying. They can't all be lying. And when you look at their cases, the similarities are so apparent. It's there. It's just there. So we're now at a point where we have to now fight the substantial injustice test, because it's unfair. So we've actually got a private members bill that one of the JENGbA campaigners has written herself with the help of some really good legal professionals, and we need to pass it through Parliament so that is abolished. And if that is abolished, then everyone will have the right to an appeal. And I think, everyone should have the right to an appeal. Over the years, we've won quite a few awards, and it's been great. And you don't win awards unless you're doing something right. And these are awards from sort of quite prestigious places who've been watching our work, supported us, and seen what we've done and want to say, you know, keep on the good work. So I think an award, okay, it's just a piece of glass on a shelf, but it's almost like a pat on the back, and it sort of spurs you on to do a little bit more, because it sometimes I feel like giving it all up, because I spend all of my life doing this and every day, and it burns you up inside. And I sometimes look at ordinary people and think, I wish I could just get on and not have to do this anymore. And then someone nominates you for an award and you think, I can't stop, because people want us to do this and we have to carry on.
So working with JENGbA, behind the scenes and stuff, you've been doing some amazing work. In terms of the public, what challenges are you facing right now that the public can get involved and help with?
Well, because we've got the private members bill, we also have a petition that the public can sign, so that when it goes to Parliament, we can say, look, the public are on our side as well. But anyone who wants to help us should write to their MP and just say, I'm your constituent, I don't agree with what is happening, and you need to support the private members bill that JENGbA has already written. But the thing is, because of 2016, a lot of people who did know about joint enterprise think that the problem's been solved, and that convictions are not happening anymore, and they think that those that were wrongly convicted have had appeals and they've been released. So it's about challenging that myth, and it's a really difficult one. And we're a little bit confused as to how we do that, because journalists are not really that interested in us anymore. And unless we do something big or exciting or different, then no one wants to write about it in the newspapers. So what we've found is that if we collaborate with others, particularly the academics who are doing research, we can, that is so beneficial in putting out there that from our perspective and from their research, we're still right and it's still going on. The Centre for Crime and Justice Studies have just done a really big piece of research that's going to be released pretty soon. It's going to be quite damning, it really is, and it's things like that that get us back out there in the newspapers, and people start to see that we're still around and then it's still going on. But the main thing is Parliament, because we've gone through the courts are not prepared to help us, so Parliament has to help us. They can change the law, they can abolish substantial injustice, and they can demand that people have the right to an appeal. And that's all we're asking, just the right to it. We're not asking that you open everyone's prison door and send them all out. We're asking that people who haven't murdered anyone get the right to have an appeal.
What have the responses been, since there is clear evidence that the law is wrong, and more than wrong, like you said, it's an abomination? The message has gone out there, there's been protests. What has been the response of the government, of those in charge, those lawmakers?
There are a lot of parliamentarians who are very much on our side, and they really do want to help. But there are also a lot of them who are really not interested, because crime and justice from their point of view is about punishment and telling their constituents, we're going to be tough on crime, we're going to put more people in prison, we're not going to put up with violence on our streets. So when you've got a message like that gets you votes, you can't then say, we're going to let these people out of prison because they shouldn't be there in the first place. And a lot of the reasons why this has happened is because of political policy, because Parliament and parliamentarians have put this in place, so they are to blame. And when people are to blame, they don't like accepting that they're wrong, but these people work for us, or apparently they're supposed to work for us, but at the moment they're all working against us, and it's time that us, as just ordinary members of the public, actually said, if you don't want to work for us, then we're not going to vote for you. And if you think it's okay to put innocent people in prison, then we're not going to vote for you. And if you think it's okay to put children in prison for life, even though you know they didn't murder anyone, we're absolutely, definitely not going to vote for you. And I think that's the message that we've got to get out there. They are in charge of this and they are refusing to do anything about it. But that said, there are some There are some MPs out there who've gone public and said that the law is wrong and they want to do something about it. We just need a few more of them.
You've done some amazing work. You've started to collab with, you said earlier, lawyers who are doing pro bono work.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about those achievements and that the fight is fighting?
Well, it was kind of like 10 years of hard slog, you know, and it feels like, and we were vindicated with the Supreme Court. That was, you know, no one can tell us we were wrong now, because even the Supreme Court said we were right.
Yeah.
Regardless of that bittersweet victory and then putting something in place that prevented us from having the justice that we deserved. But because of all of that, we've got sort of organisations like Amnesty, the Howard League, Liberty. You know, these are organisations that have got some brilliant legal minds working for them, and they're coming to us now and saying, right, what is it you think you need to do? Because we've done the legwork. Where do we go from here? And there's a sort of, the new challenge is high up from now on, and it's about saying, yeah, we were right. You've shafted us once again,
Yeah.
but we're not going away. I mean, for the last 3 or 4 years, it's been felt like we've disappeared because we just didn't know where to go now. But when you sort of sit back and you keep looking at what's happening, you find a new way forward. And if it was up to me, I'd sue the police, I'd sue the Crown Prosecution Service, I'd sue the judges. You know, the judges got it wrong. Why are they still judges? Why are they still judges? Why are prosecutors still allowed to both prosecute and defend in a joint enterprise case? I would argue that the prosecutors have maintained the status quo so that they can defend and prosecute, and it keeps them in a job, and they've kept that circle going. So they're to blame, because very often they then become the judges, and as judges they're keeping that rotation of injustice going, because at the end of the day these are usually white men who want to get a paycheck at the end of the month.
You said 2 prisons, or more than 2 prisons, multiple private prisons are being built.
Yeah.
If anything like the US, you know how private prisons are built in the US and there's cheap labour and stuff like that.
It's exactly the same here.
Do you reckon that's the way it's going? And
I think that's the way it's been going for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
The prison population has doubled in about 20 years. And
purely for capitalistic reasons?
Yeah, prisoners earn wages like £3.50 a week, and they're doing jobs that someone on the outside could be doing in a factory. But these companies don't need to pay for the factory or decent wages to people. They can just give a prisoner £3.50 a week. That's got to stop. It's slave labour, you know. And if we have more prisons, someone is making a profit from that misery, and it's not me or you. They are bodies that function, and it's just like America. And the scary thing is, America is huge. We're a tiny island. Very small island, and if you look at the amount of people who have been convicted of murder in this country and been given a life sentence in comparison to the whole of Europe combined, I think a few years ago the figure was 19% of our prisoners were convicted of murder in this country. The whole of Europe combined was less than 3%. So if you think about that, we're either a nation of homicidal maniacs or there's something wrong with the law.
Definitely something wrong with the law. I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And if you look at the figures that we have, just us on our own, the majority of the people we support, the greatest percentage are black people, young black men.
I was going to ask you, a lot of the areas, when I was looking behind the scenes, a lot of the statistics in the areas, for example, we have a joint enterprise case in our community. It's usually the areas where there's a lot of gentrification happening. There's like less socially deprived areas, well, the socially deprived areas. This is probably a sinister outlook, but is it a way of cleaning up these areas?
If you take away all the young men and you take them away for 20 years, who are the young women going to marry and have children with? They've all gone, right? It's ethnic cleansing. Let's call it what it is. It's racism, it's ethnic cleansing, and it's a really good way of taking perhaps a place like this, which is virtually Manchester city centre, getting rid of everyone who lives here and bringing in the apartment blocks for people who've got more money and who can afford to live here. This is the prime location. prime location.
And the quickest way, like you said, is
And
to
the quickest way,
clear up the
yeah,
streets.
clear up the streets and bring in the developers, and you know, even Manchester City Council could make a fortune out of this area if they wanted to. Maybe that's why Greater Manchester Police call themselves the biggest gang in the country.
Well, Jan, I'd say definitely you're one of them super women that actually fight, and honestly, you have my support.
Thank you.
And we're going to put some links and stuff down below on the YouTube channel, wherever we put it, to support. But JENGbA is doing work, and it's clearly a fight against capitalism in a sense,
Yeah.
against those wealthier. It's another class issue, but targeting minorities, like you said, that are affected massively. But you've been doing some great work, like you said, 10 years, and those 10 years haven't been for nothing.
Yeah, no, they've
You've
not.
raised the
And
voices.
one of the
Yeah.
other things that, I mean, this is kind of like a prediction that I have. One of the things that JENGbA are saying, and we've been saying for a while, is that the law is racist.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And one of my predictions is, and I hope I'm wrong, that because they'd rather not solve the problem, they'd rather maintain what they're doing because it works for them, they'll just start charging more white men and convicting more white men, so that in 5-6 years' time they can say, well, you know, we've balanced it out now.
Yeah.
But that'll just be balancing out further injustice. So my message to anybody is absolutely any one of us could get caught up in a joint enterprise and have absolutely nothing to do with it. And find yourself doing a life, and the life sentences are not 15 years and you get out in half unless for good behaviour. If you get a tariff of 25 years, you don't even get up for parole until you've done the 25 years. And life does mean life because you're then on licence for 99 years.
Unity Gym is like, it's a chance for us to actually leave the area, communicate with different people that are similar to us, that are from like different communities. So instead of us actually like getting into problems and not understanding each other, it's like a chance for us to get to know each other.
People get wrong that Broom Hall's like, oh, it's like a place like gang members, this and that. That's not necessarily true. Like, you got people that, for example, at this gym, that would care for you, and you know, it's just a good place to be at. It's full of peace and harmony, and it's just with like positive vibes.
And that's important for people to know, because everyone seems to think you can go in and out of prison and it's an easy thing to do, and you know, but it's not at all. It's like you say, worse than it's the same as America. Once you're in that door, you're trapped.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Honestly, some great insight into joint enterprise.
Thank you.
I think I've learned. For me, I always used to see joint enterprise as a racial issue against minorities. However, I think we've kind of established that it's also a class issue.
It is.
It's an economic issue.
Mhm.
And you know, with gentrification,
Yeah.
it's very Moss side right now. And you can see buildings being built around the corners and stuff. And where I'm from, Broom Hall, there's buildings being built,
Yeah,
whether it's students,
there's a
restaurants.
squeeze.
There is. But like you said, it's the people versus the money, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is hard. It
Yeah.
is hard, but if we stand up for ourselves
Definitely.
and refuse to accept it, then yeah, you've got to fight. Because if someone had fought years ago, because if this started, joint enterprise took a wrong turn in 1984, if someone had started this fight back then, my son would never have been convicted. So from my point of view, okay, my son had to serve his entire sentence and go through that misery, but I don't want anyone else to do that. And I won't stop until I know that some other mother isn't heartbroken because she's lost her son or daughter to something that's wrong. And that's important. You have to fight. If you don't want to fight for yourself, fight for other people as well.
Definitely, yeah.